Join me as I brave the haunted marshes at night to uncover the spine-chilling secrets lurking in the darkness. The summer of my 19th year clung to me like damp linen, heavy with the kind of heat that makes your thoughts sluggish and your skin prickle. I was working the graveyard shift at a diner called Mabel's, a greasy spoon perched on the edge of a coastal town called Greyhaven, where the fog rolled in thick and the ocean whispered secrets to anyone who'd listen. The job wasn't glamorous. Minimum wage, coffee stains on my apron, and a jukebox that only played half its songs right. But it kept me out of my aunt's hair. She'd taken me in after my parents passed, and though she never said it, I knew she'd rather I wasn't lounging around her cramped cottage all day. So, I slung burgers and poured coffee for truckers and fishermen, grateful for the excuse to be anywhere but home. Mabel's was the kind of place that felt stuck in time, with checkered floors and a neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The food wasn't terrible, but it wasn't why people came. They came for the view, the way the cliffs dropped into the churning Atlantic, visible through the diner's wide windows on clear nights. Most nights, though, the fog was so dense you couldn't see past the parking lot. It gave the place an eerie charm, like you were dining at the edge of the world. The regulars didn't mind. They'd sit at the counter, swapping stories about storms and shipwrecks, while I refilled their mugs and tried not to eavesdrop. I'd been at Mabel's for 3 months when it happened. The night was quiet, even for a Tuesday. The fog was thicker than usual, curling against the windows like smoke. The only customers were a trucker nursing a plate of fries and an old woman who came in every week to read her romance novels over a slice of pie. I was wiping down the counter, the rag sticky with grease, when the phone rang. Not the diner's landline, but the ancient rotary phone we used for takeout orders. It was a relic, barely functional, and we hardly got calls on it anymore, since most folks used an app. The sound startled me, a shrill jangle that cut through the hum of the jukebox. I picked up the receiver, expecting a wrong number. Mabel's Diner. How can I help you? There was a pause, long enough that I thought the line was dead. Then a voice, low and raspy, said, "I need a delivery. 1 cheeseburger, extra pickles, and a side of fries. Deliver it to 47 Driftwood Lane." The address made my stomach twist. Driftwood Lane was a narrow, unpaved road that wound through the marshes on the outskirts of town. It was outside our usual delivery zone, a good 25 minutes away, and the kind of place you didn't go unless you had to. The marshes were a maze of tidal pools and tall reeds, shrouded in fog most nights. Locals said strange things happened out there. Lights flickering where no houses stood. Voices calling from the water. I'd heard the stories since I was a kid, but I'd never been out that way myself. I glanced at my boss, Lena, who was leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. She was in her 40s, with a smoker's cough and a no-nonsense attitude. "It's out of our zone," I said, covering the receiver. "You want me to tell them no?" Lena didn't look up. "We haven't had a delivery all night. Take it, it's money." I hesitated, but the voice on the phone was waiting. "All right," I said. "It'll be about 30 minutes. Name for the order?" "Elliot," the voice said. And then the line went dead. I scribbled the order on a ticket and handed it to the cook, a grizzled guy named Pete who barely spoke. As he slapped a patty on the grill, I checked the delivery slip again. The instructions were odd. Park at the end of the lane. Walk to the dock. Knock on the boat's hatch. A boat? That was new. I delivered to houses, apartments, even a trailer park once, but never a boat. I figured it was one of those houseboats moored in the marshes, though I couldn't imagine why anyone would live out there. When the burger was ready, I bagged it up, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The diner's delivery van was a rusting heap, its engine wheezing like an old man. I climbed in, the smell of stale fries and vinyl hitting me as I started it up. The fog was so thick I could barely see the road, and the headlights only made it worse, scattering light into a hazy glow. I punched the address into my phone's GPS and pulled out of the lot, the diner's neon sign fading into the mist behind me.
The drive felt endless. Greyhaven wasn't a big town, but Driftwood Lane was on the far side, where the houses thinned out and the marshes took over. The road narrowed, pavement giving way to gravel, then dirt. My tires crunched over the uneven ground, and the GPS kept losing signal, the map flickering on my screen. I passed a few shacks, their windows dark, and a rusted sign warning about alligators. The air smelled like salt and decay, that sour tang that clings to your clothes. I rolled up the windows and cranked the heat, but it didn't help. The fog seemed to seep into the van, chilling me through my jacket. When I finally reached the end of Driftwood Lane, the GPS announced I'd arrived, but there was nothing to see. Just a wooden dock jutting into the marsh, half swallowed by fog. No house, no lights, just the faint outline of a boat tied to the dock. It was small, maybe 20 feet long, with a low cabin and peeling paint. I parked the van, grabbed the bag, and stepped out, my sneakers sinking into the muddy ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional croak of a frog or the lap of water against the dock. I walked toward the boat, my flashlight cutting through the fog. The delivery instructions echoed in my head. Knock on the boat's hatch. It sounded simple enough, but something about the place felt wrong. The air was too still, the fog too thick. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like eyes were peering out from the reeds. I told myself it was just nerves, that I'd been listening to too many of the regulars' ghost stories. Still, my hand trembled as I reached the dock. The boat was old, its hull streaked with algae. A single porthole glowed faintly, the light diffused by a tattered curtain. I climbed onto the dock, the boards creaking under my weight, and approached the hatch. It was a small metal door, rusted at the edges. I knocked once, the sound dull against the wood. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, and waited. The fog seemed to swallow the sound, muffling it into nothing. Just as I was about to knock a third time, I saw the curtain in the porthole twitch. It was subtle, a quick flutter, like someone had brushed against it. My heart skipped. Someone was inside, watching me. I stood there, frozen, expecting the hatch to open, but it didn't. The silence stretched on, and I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, like the air itself was pressing against me. Then I heard it, a low hum, like an engine, coming from the road behind me. Headlights cut through the fog, and I turned to see two cars pulling up beside the van. They weren't marked, no sirens or flashing lights, but they didn't look like civilian vehicles either. Their engines idled, low and steady, as a man stepped out of the first car. He was tall, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, his face half hidden in the shadows. He raised a hand, motioning for me to come closer. I hesitated, clutching the bag tighter. Was this the customer? But something about the way he moved, quick and deliberate, set me on edge. As I stepped off the dock, he flashed something in his hand, a badge, glinting in the headlights. "Stay where you are," he said, his voice calm but firm. Put the bag down and walk toward me, slowly. My mouth went dry. "I'm just delivering food," I said, my voice cracking. "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on me, his hand resting near his hip. I set the bag on the dock and walked toward him, my heart pounding. As I got closer, I saw more figures, 3, maybe 4 others, moving in the fog. They weren't in uniforms, but they carried themselves like cops, their flashlights sweeping the marsh in tight, controlled arcs. The man with the badge met me halfway. "You're the delivery driver?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Yeah," I said. "Mabel's Diner. I was just dropping off an order." He glanced at the boat, then back at me. "You knock on that hatch?" I nodded. No one answered. I was about to leave. He studied me for a moment, his face unreadable. "Get back in your van," he said. "Wait there." I didn't argue. I climbed into the van, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I watched the figures move toward the boat, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies. They didn't speak, didn't call out. One of them approached the hatch, tested it, and shook his head when it didn't budge. They fanned out, circling the boat, their movements silent and precise. It was like watching a pack of wolves closing in on prey. I don't know how long I sat there, the engine idling, the bag of food still on the dock. The fog seemed to thicken, blurring the edges of everything. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Why were cops staking out a houseboat in the middle of nowhere? And why had someone ordered a burger to a place under surveillance? The curtain's twitch replayed in my head, that fleeting movement that told me someone was inside. Had they seen the cops? Were they waiting for me to leave before making a move? Eventually, the man with the badge came back. He leaned into my window, his face close enough that I could smell the mint on his breath. "You got the order details?" he asked. I pulled up the app on my phone and showed him the screen. It listed the address, the food, and the name, Elliot. There was a phone number too, but when he dialed it, his expression didn't change. "Burner," he muttered, more to himself than to me. He handed my phone back. "You need to leave, now." "What about the food?" I asked, gesturing to the bag on the dock. "My boss is going to kill me if I come back with it." He gave me a look that was half pity, half impatience. "Kid, trust me. Your boss isn't your problem right now." He straightened up and walked away, disappearing into the fog. I drove back to the diner in a daze, the empty passenger seat where the bag should have been a silent accusation. The marshes faded into the rear view, but the unease stayed with me, coiling in my gut like a snake. When I got back, Lena barely looked up from her phone. "No tip?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "They didn't answer," I said, leaving out the part about the cops. I didn't know why, but it felt like something I shouldn't talk about, like I'd stumbled into a secret that wasn't mine to share. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boat, the curtain, the cops moving through the fog like ghosts. Who was Elliot? Why had they ordered food to a place crawling with police? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Maybe the person in the boat didn't know they were being watched. Maybe the order was a mistake, a glitch in the app. Or maybe it was something else, something deliberate. A test, a trap, a signal. I'd been a pawn, delivering a burger to a place where no one was supposed to be. The next day, I checked the news, half expecting a headline about a drug bust or a fugitive caught in the marshes. But there was nothing, just stories about the weather and a local fishing tournament. I asked Lena if she'd heard anything about Driftwood Lane, but she just shrugged and told me to scrub the grill. Life at Mabel's went on, the fog rolled in, and the jukebox kept skipping. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brushed against something dangerous, something I was lucky to walk away from. Weeks later, I overheard a couple of regulars at the counter, their voices low as they talked about a boat that had washed up in the marshes. Empty, they said, except for a single chair bolted to the floor facing the porthole. No one mentioned a burger or a delivery, and I didn't ask. Some things I decided were better left in the fog. The days after that night blurred into the usual rhythm of the diner, but the memory of Driftwood Lane clung to me like damp, salt air. I'd catch myself staring out the diner's windows, half expecting to see those unmarked cars emerge from the fog. I stopped taking delivery shifts for a while, sticking to the counter, where the worst thing I had to deal with was a spilled coffee or a drunk fisherman arguing about his tab. But the questions never left me. Who was in that boat? Why had they ordered food? And why had the cops been so quiet, so careful? I started paying more attention to the regular stories, the ones I'd always dismissed as tall tales. Greyhaven had its share of legends, ghost ships, smugglers' coves, people vanishing into the marshes. Most of it was nonsense, fueled by cheap whiskey and long winters, but after that night, I wasn't so sure. There was something about the marshes that felt alive, like they were holding their breath, waiting for you to make a wrong move. One night, about a month later, I was closing up alone. Lena had left early, and Pete was in the back, scrubbing pots. The diner was empty, the jukebox silent for once. I was mopping the floor when the rotary phone rang again. My heart stopped. I stared at it, the sound echoing in the empty diner like a scream. I didn't want to answer, but my feet moved before my brain caught up. I picked up the receiver, my hand shaking. "Mabel's Diner," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause, just like before. Then that same raspy voice. "1 cheeseburger, extra pickles, 47 Driftwood Lane."
I dropped the phone. It clattered against the counter, the dial tone buzzing like a swarm of bees. I didn't tell Lena, didn't tell Pete. I just locked up and left, the mop still leaning against the wall. The next day, I quit. I told my aunt I'd find another job, something in town, something normal. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and handed me a plate of eggs. I never went back to Driftwood Lane. I avoided the marshes altogether, taking the long way around whenever I had to drive out of town. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the air smells like salt and decay, I think about that boat, that twitch of the curtain, those silent cops in the dark. And I wonder if Elliot, or whoever was in that boat, is still out there, waiting for another delivery, another knock on the hatch. I moved away from Greyhaven a year later, chasing a job at a warehouse 2 towns over. Life moved on, and the diner became a memory, like the taste of bad coffee or the ache of a long shift. But every now and then, someone would mention the marshes, or I'd catch a whiff of that sour, salty air, and it would all come rushing back. I'd see that boat in my mind, the porthole glowing, the fog curling around it like fingers. And I'd wonder what I'd walked into that night, what I'd narrowly escaped. Last week, I ran into an old regular from Mabel's at a gas station. He was older now, his beard grayer, but he recognized me right away. We got to talking, and I don't know why, but I brought up that night in the marshes. His face changed, like he knew something I didn't. "You're lucky," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Folks don't come back from Driftwood Lane the same." He wouldn't say more, just climbed into his truck and drove off. I stood there, the smell of gasoline mixing with the faint salt of the coast, and felt that old prickle at the back of my neck. I don't know what happened out there, and I don't think I ever will. But I know one thing. I'll never answer another call from that rotary phone, no matter who's on the other end.